Hi everyone, and welcome to my presentation for IR seminar class. My paper is entitled Between Two Powers: How Redefining the US-Mongolian Alliance Can Strengthen East Asian Policy. So in my paper I talked mainly about how Mongolia, given its strategic location set between Russia and China, can offer an abundance of benefits to the United States if the United States continues to invest in Mongolia's infrastructure, their economy, and their defense forces. So I kind of break up my paper by chronological order, talking about how Mongolia came to be the state it is today, and what roles the countries of China, the United States, and Russia played in its foundation. So I begin my paper with a history of modern Mongolia, because I'm guessing a lot of people probably don't know a lot about how Mongolia came to be the sovereign nation that it is today. I talk about the issues that Mongolia faces in its country, like I said, like infrastructure, jobs, their economy, their issues with their natural resources and their environment. Then I talk about the economy of Mongolia. And then I go into Mongolian-Chinese relations. I don't go all the way back to like the age of Genghis Khan and his conquests across Asia. I talk more about modern, or contemporary Mongolia, so basically since 1911. And then I talk about Mongolian-Russian relations. And then I talk about US-Mongolian relations. And then finally I move into some more of my meta-analysis, where I talk about how the US can benefit the Mongolian economy and vice versa, the US influence on Mongolian military and the aid that the Mongolian military can play in US security interests, particularly in East Asia, US soft power influences on Mongolian democracy, and then I kind of wrap it up by talking about what I see in the future for the US and Mongolia. So Mongolia, as a state that we know it as today, really didn't appear until 1911. So after the Mongol conquests, Mongolia had created the largest land empire in history. It stretched all the way from Korea to Poland, and they ruled for about 300 years. But there was a lot of civil war and fractiousness, so the Mongolian Empire was really disbanded in about 1647, when the Qing dynasty in China took southern China back into control of the Qing dynasty. So from about 1647 to 1911, the Qing dynasty um, ruled Mongolia. Now, the Qing dynasty was overthrown in 1911. They were the final dynasty of China before it entered its republic era. And at that point, Mongolia became independent, but only Outer Mongolia. So there's kind of two Mongolias. So there's Inner Mongolia, which is a province of China, so it's a sovereign state of China. And then there's Outer Mongolia, which is the sovereign republic of Mongolia. It's the separate entity. So when the Mongolians broke free of the Qing dynasty in 1911, Inner Mongolia was retained by China, and Outer Mongolia became an independent state. However, its independence didn't last very long. Mongolia did not have a successful transition to democracy at this point, so they were influenced a lot by the burgeoning Soviet Union, and they were actually absorbed by the Soviet Union in the mid 1920s. So Mongolia actually became the first satellite state of the Soviet Union. We tend to not think of the Soviet Union expanding until after World War II, but really Mongolia became that prototype of the satellite system. It was a brutal period for Mongolia. Their population at the time was only about 600,000, and through Stalinist purges in Mongolia, about 25,000 Mongolians, 25 to 60,000 depending on scholars, they were killed as Mongolians were executed for mostly their Buddhist beliefs, and the Soviet Union tried to stamp out any resistance. So it was kind of a brutal period for Mongolia at that point. So they lasted throughout the Cold War, and they were one of the first countries to break away. In 1990, a group of students led protests in Sukhobatar Square, which is like the main square in Mongolia, and it actually led to a peaceful breakaway from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union removed their troops and their influence, and Mongolia actually made a successful, peaceful transition to democracy. Not a single shot was fired. So it was very different from what you see in a lot of other countries that broke away from the Soviet Union in the 90s. So they did found a multi-party democracy with a lot of help from the United States, which we'll get into later. So let's talk about some of the issues in the Mongolian economy, specifically their economic issues. So they have a very small economy because they're a small country, right? So like 3 million people in the country. So their GDP is only about $13.5 billion, quite small. They are they have some issues with corruption, as smaller states tend to do. They are ranked as the 93rd most corrupt country globally by the Global Corruption Index. So, they're right in the middle of the pack. The index ranks about 190 countries, so they're right in the middle. In the Doing Business Index, published by the World Bank, they have a rank of 81 in doing business, so it's a pretty decent rank. So it's okay to do business in China. It's not great, or Mongolia, excuse me. It's not great. Starting a business in Mongolia is more difficult than 67% of the rest of the world, so it's kind of difficult to start legitimate businesses in Mongolia. 85% of Mongolian exports go to China, so they are extraordinarily dependent on China for their export business, mainly due to proximity, and China's buying a lot of what they have to sell. So they sell, we'll get into it, but they sell a lot of rare earth minerals and mining and such. So China's very interested in that.